He kissed her goodbye every night at 10 p.m., said he was saving lives in a lab. One night, she followed him. Laura didn't ask for much. A warm dinner, a safe home, a husband who looked at her the way he used to, like she was the only voice in a crowded room. The kind of quiet intimacy built not from grand gestures, but from loyalty, shared routines, trust. And for years, Brian gave her exactly that, or so she thought. He worked as a lab coordinator at a local medical center. Nothing glamorous, but essential, or so he said. He'd always been steady, predictable, the kind of man who folded laundry without being asked and still brought her tea on cold mornings. But in the last 4 months, something had changed. It began with a schedule shift. They need someone for the night rotation, Brian had explained, not quite meeting her eyes, just until they hire a new tech. Laura nodded. She trusted him. Of course she did. But soon the shifts multiplied. 3 nights a week became 4, then 5, then 6. At first, she missed him with quiet patience, setting aside dinner plates that went untouched, washing his clothes alone, falling asleep to the hollow ache of an empty bed. But then came the little signs, the way he started texting less, the way he flinched when she asked how work had been, the way his cologne smelled stronger, sharper, as if masking something. And then there was the silence. He stopped asking about her day. He stopped noticing when she cried during movies. He'd come home at 6 a.m., shower immediately, and collapse into bed without so much as a glance. One night, Laura waited up with dinner. Pasta, his favorite, with too much garlic the way he liked it. He didn't show. No call, no message. At 3 a.m., she finally gave up, staring at her reflection in the dark kitchen window, wondering when she had stopped being someone he wanted to come home to. When Brian finally walked through the door the next morning, his scrubs were wrinkled, but his shoes were clean. Too clean. "Long night?" she asked. He kissed her forehead without looking at her. "Exhausting." Then he went straight to the shower. Laura sat at the table, untouched plate still warm in the oven, and felt something shift inside her. Not rage, not even suspicion yet, just a flicker, a voice she'd long silenced. Pay attention. Later that week, she tried calling the hospital just to hear the front desk confirm his shift, but the line rang endlessly. No one answered, and when she mentioned the failed call that evening, Brian got strangely defensive. "They're swamped. Phones go unanswered. Why are you even calling?" he asked, voice tight. "Just wanted to hear your voice," she said softly. He didn't reply. That night, she sat on their bed long after he left, scrolling through old photos, beach trips, birthdays, late-night pizza on the floor, moments that now felt like borrowed time. Was she overthinking? Inventing betrayal to explain distance? No, Laura wasn't paranoid. She was perceptive. And perception, when paired with silence, often leads to terrible truths. The next morning, she searched his laundry before starting the wash. She didn't expect to find anything, but she did. A receipt. Stuffed in the pocket of his scrub pants, from a restaurant across town, not the hospital cafeteria. A date. A time. Midnight. She held the slip of paper like it might burn her fingers. That night, she didn't say a word. She let him get ready for his shift, watched him button his shirt, comb his hair, spray that same overpowering cologne. He kissed her forehead like always, but something in her eyes must have changed, because this time, he hesitated. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," she said. "Be safe." He smiled. She didn't, because now the voice in her chest wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. The next morning, Laura folded Brian's clothes with shaking hands. The receipt hadn't vanished. It wasn't a dream. Midnight dinner at a downtown restaurant, while she sat alone, waiting for a man who claimed to be surrounded by lab reports and sterile lights. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Something in her told her to wait, to observe, because sometimes, when you ask questions too soon, liars get better at lying. So instead, she watched. She started marking dates in a notebook, pretending it was just a grocery list. She wrote down every shift he claimed to have, every time he came home later than expected, every item of clothing that smelled off. Not bad, just different, like soft floral traces of a woman's perfume clinging to the collar of his jacket. Notes of vanilla, sometimes lilac. Brian had always been subtle, a calculated man, the kind who double-checked locks and reread emails before sending them. If he was lying, he was doing it with precision. But the body doesn't lie the way words do. He showered more the moment he walked in. The urgency of it didn't match exhaustion, it matched guilt. He left his phone in the car more often, claimed it was charging. He stopped inviting her to work events, even the virtual ones. The worst part wasn't even the deception. It was how easily he did it, as if she had become invisible to him. Laura began to feel like a ghost in her own home. She stopped cooking for both. She stopped folding his socks together. She stopped waiting by the door. But she never stopped watching. One night, while Brian was asleep, she quietly unlocked his phone. She wasn't proud of it, but pride doesn't protect you from betrayal. Instinct does. The password was the same, their anniversary, of course. She opened his recent apps. Nothing. All cleared. She checked his messages. Clean. Too clean. Then she opened the photo gallery, and there it was. A selfie. Not of him, of a woman, blonde, young, in a mirror, holding the phone with one hand, her other hand resting on a bare chest. His. Laura stared at the screen, breath gone. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just froze. There was no caption, no date, but the lighting was recent. She knew because of the scar on Brian's shoulder. He got it last month from a fall in the garage. She saved the photo, emailed it to herself, then quietly placed the phone back on the nightstand. The next morning, Brian kissed her cheek. She let him. That day she called in sick to work, sat in the kitchen for hours, staring at the walls like they might open and tell her what to do. This wasn't just infidelity. It was construction, a second life being built in the shadows of hers. And what hurt most was realizing how much time she had spent believing he was just tired, just stressed, just busy, when in fact, he was simply gone. But Laura wasn't weak. She had spent years pouring herself into this man. She deserved more than an apology. She deserved the full truth. So she waited for one more shift, one more night, one more kiss on the forehead before he disappeared into the dark. And when he did, she followed. Laura didn't sleep the night before. She lay in bed with her eyes open, her body still, listening to the rhythmic rise and fall of Brian's breath beside her. That same breath he had once whispered, "I'll never lie to you," with. That same breath now filled with the scent of someone else. By morning, she had made her decision. She didn't want to confront him, not yet. Not with tears or anger or broken plates. She wanted the full picture, the raw, unfiltered truth, something he couldn't deny, twist, or erase. So when Brian left that evening, 9:54 p.m., just like always, Laura waited 10 minutes, then grabbed her coat and keys. She didn't tell anyone, not her sister, not her closest friend. There was something sacred about this choice, a quiet ritual of reclaiming what had been stolen, her clarity. She got into her car and pulled out slowly, headlights off. Brian's car wasn't hard to follow, a blue SUV with a dent in the back bumper from last winter. He always took the same road, toward the hospital district. Only this time, he didn't turn into the parking garage. He passed it. Laura's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He drove another 15 minutes into a quieter neighborhood she didn't recognize. Older homes, wide trees, that kind of eerie suburban stillness where secrets live behind manicured lawns. Then he turned into a driveway. A small white house with flower pots by the porch, lights on in the living room. Laura parked 2 houses down, killed the engine, lowered her seat, and waited. She watched him get out, check his phone, look around, not nervously, confidently, like he belonged there. He knocked once. The door opened. A woman stood there, mid-30s, long blonde hair, soft smile. She let him in, without hesitation. The door closed behind them. Laura didn't cry. She didn't move. The weight of confirmation is heavier than doubt. Doubt is air. Suspicion is fog. But truth is stone. For the next 2 hours she sat there, her breath slow, shallow, her hands numb. Her mind wandered into strange places. Their first apartment, his mother's funeral, the day they painted the nursery they never got to use. At 1:14 a.m., the front door opened again. Brian stepped out, his jacket slung casually over one shoulder. He kissed the woman on the cheek. She smiled. He walked to his car like nothing was out of place in the universe. Laura slid down lower, heart pounding. As he drove away, she didn't follow. She waited. Waited until the house went dark. Until the only thing left on that street was the sound of her own breath and the truth echoing in her chest like a scream she hadn't let out yet. She didn't go home. Not immediately. She parked in a grocery store lot and sat there in silence, staring at nothing. Not because she didn't know what to do next, but because she knew exactly what she had to do. And it terrified her. The next night, Laura returned, not to follow, not to watch, to confront. But not him. She had seen all she needed from Brian. His calm betrayal, the way he kissed that woman like he'd kissed Laura 1,000 times before. What she wanted now was answers, not guesses, not excuses. Truth, even if it came from the other side of the lie. Laura waited until 9:40 p.m., knowing Brian would already be en route. She drove the same route he had taken, heart thudding like a slow drumbeat in her chest. The neighborhood looked different this time, less eerie, more surgical, like every house had something to hide behind its blinds. She parked a block away and walked the rest on foot. Her hands were cold, her breath short. When she reached the porch, she hesitated only once, just long enough to remember who she was before all this began. Then she knocked. 3 soft knocks. Not angry, not demanding, just enough to be heard. Footsteps approached. The porch light flicked on. Then the door opened. She was even more beautiful up close. Early 30s, maybe. Well kept, calm. Her eyes registered surprise first, then something else. Recognition? No, more like resignation. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. Laura took a breath. "Are you seeing Brian?" There was a pause, barely a second. Then the woman tilted her head. "Are you his wife?" Laura didn't answer. She didn't have to. The woman sighed, stepped aside. "You should come in." Laura hesitated, then crossed the threshold. The living room was neat, minimalist, scented candles burning softly on a shelf. It smelled of lavender and cinnamon. Warm, safe, deceptively so. "I'm Samantha," the woman said, gesturing to the couch. Laura sat on the edge, hands clasped. "How long?" "2 years," Samantha said without blinking. Laura blinked instead. "2?" Samantha nodded. "I met him at a work function. He said he was divorced, that his ex-wife was unstable, that she didn't let him see his kid." Laura shook her head slowly. "We don't have kids." Samantha looked down. "That figures." For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward. It was eerie. Two women sitting in the eye of a storm, both tethered to a man who had spun their lives like a spider's web. "I found a photo of you once, in his car. You were on the beach. He said it was old, that he kept it for closure." Laura felt her stomach twist. That photo was from their honeymoon. "Did he live here?" Laura asked. "Not full-time," Samantha said. "He said his job required him to stay near the hospital during certain weeks. Sometimes he'd stay here for days, other times he'd disappear for a while. He was always just out of reach, but charming." Laura looked around the space again, more closely this time. A pair of slippers by the couch, a jacket slung over a chair, and a framed picture on the shelf. It was Brian, with Samantha, smiling like a man who had nothing to hide. "I'm sorry," Samantha said, quieter now. "If I had known—" Laura shook her head. "You weren't the one lying." They sat in silence again, this time not as strangers, but as reluctant witnesses to the same man's duplicity. Then Samantha stood up, walked into the hallway, returned with a small folder. "He gave me copies of some tax forms, proof of divorce. I never thought to question it." Laura opened the folder. Fake documents, all of them. Convincing, but not real. She recognized the errors instantly. Her name spelled wrong, dates that didn't match. "He created an entire story," Laura whispered. Samantha nodded. "I thought I was the only one." Laura met her eyes. "You weren't." Laura drove home that night with the silence of Samantha's house still clinging to her skin. It wasn't just the lies that haunted her now. It was the architecture of them, the structure. Brian hadn't simply cheated, he had designed a second life, curated down to the smallest details. And he'd done it so cleanly, so calmly, that both women believed they were his only truth. By the time she reached home, she wasn't shaking, she wasn't crying. She was studying, observing. Every moment of their relationship now played in reverse like some cruel film. Every delayed reply, every canceled weekend, every missed birthday suddenly made sense. And not just in the way betrayal makes sense, in the way deception becomes habit. Laura pulled out her notebook. She began to cross-reference the nights he had worked late with receipts, text timestamps, photos, and something new emerged. A pattern. He wasn't just living between two women. There was a third name. Rachel. A charge on a shared card from a boutique Laura had never heard of, Rachel's Home Interiors. The receipt had no shipping address, but the time and date aligned perfectly with one of Brian's conference weekends. Laura's heart didn't break again. It had already shattered. This wasn't more heartbreak. This was analysis. She found Rachel on social media, an interior designer based just outside the city, single, or at least she claimed to be. Recent posts showed wine nights, brunches, And in one picture, a man with his face turned conveniently away from the camera. But Laura knew that back, that slouch, that wristwatch. It was Brian. Laura didn't contact her, not yet. She took screenshots, documented timelines, backed up everything in a private folder online. Then she opened a new browser tab. She searched, "Exposing serial cheaters anonymously." The results were endless. Articles, forums, even support groups. She read stories from other women who had lived through the same madness, men with second phones, hidden apartments, secret families. Brian was just one more ghost in a long line of manipulators who mistook silence for safety. But Laura wasn't staying silent. She returned to Samantha's house 2 days later, not to cry, not to grieve, to plan. Samantha answered the door, already expecting her. "I've been thinking," Laura said, stepping inside. "This doesn't end with us." Samantha nodded slowly. "You think there are more?" "I know there are." Laura opened her laptop and showed her the timeline, the receipts, the gallery of screenshots. Samantha sat in stunned silence. He's a professional liar," Laura replied. "He's a system, and systems have weaknesses." The two women made calls. They tracked work events, cross-checked photos, used facial recognition software on certain images. It wasn't long before a third woman confirmed their suspicions, then a fourth. Laura created an anonymous group chat. "Welcome to the wreckage," she wrote. Some women left immediately, unable to face the truth. Others stayed, shared screenshots, shared pain. Patterns repeated, words repeated. He had said the same things, gifted the same necklace, written the same love letter to 3 different women in the same year. The same lines, the same pauses. He wasn't in love. He was in control. That's what it had always been about. Power. Brian had manipulated not just their emotions, but their perceptions of each other. He painted each woman as unstable, jealous, unpredictable, ensuring none would ever think to speak to the others. Until Laura did. Now the illusion was breaking, slowly, quietly. Laura didn't fantasize about revenge. She didn't want to destroy him publicly. She wanted something quieter, exposure, to let his truth rot in the open, to dismantle the safety of his secrets. The group began compiling evidence, financial records, emails, voicemails, inconsistencies in his tax filings, potential fraud. One of the women worked in HR at a medical institution. Another had a contact at the licensing board. Laura built a folder called Brian's Real Life. She didn't know yet where it would all lead, but she knew what it wouldn't be. Forgiveness. Not this time. It took less than 3 weeks to dismantle Brian's world. Laura had always thought revenge looked loud, slammed doors, public screaming, rage played out like a movie scene. But this wasn't that. This was quiet, meticulous, surgical, and far more devastating. By the time Brian noticed anything unusual, it had already begun. First, his supervisor at the medical center called him in for a meeting. A formal complaint had been filed, anonymous but precise. Allegations of falsified documents, possible misuse of internal travel funds, and inappropriate personal conduct involving multiple individuals associated with staff members. Brian denied everything, of course. He always had. But the evidence spoke louder than his calm voice ever could. Photos, screenshots, patterns of absences aligned with dates he claimed to be on call, duplicate alibis, reimbursements for nights spent with women he introduced as consultants. He was suspended pending review. Then came the personal collapse. The women, Laura, Samantha, Rachel, and 2 others, filed formal claims for fraud and emotional misconduct. Not criminal charges, but strategic reports. One through his HR department, one through his professional board and another through a private investigator working on behalf of a woman he once promised marriage. Laura didn't lead these efforts with vengeance. She led them with clarity. She had nothing to prove to Brian anymore. He no longer had access to the part of her that once needed his approval, his touch, his apology. That part of her died the night she followed him. Now she moved through her days differently, calmer, sharper. Her home was quieter without him, but not emptier. She began to reclaim space, not just physical, but emotional. She filled it with music again, with fresh air, with peace. One night, she received a message from an unknown number. It was Brian. "You win. Happy now?" She didn't respond, because it was never about winning. It was about being free. He had spent years living like a shadow in multiple lives, adjusting his shape to whoever he needed to be, feeding on silence and belief. But Laura had broken the silence, and now other women knew they weren't crazy, they weren't paranoid, they weren't alone. Brian's lies no longer belonged to him. They belonged to the women he wounded. They belonged to the record. Weeks later, Laura walked past him in a grocery store. He looked smaller. Not physically, energetically, like someone had finally turned the lights on and exposed the man beneath the costume. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. She didn't need to. Because when you unmask someone like that, the silence becomes louder than any confrontation ever could. And in that silence, Laura felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. Not over him, over herself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream. It's expose the truth and walk away. She didn't stay broken. She didn't stay bitter. She simply made sure the lie had nowhere left to hide. Some betrayals don't shatter everything at once. They chip away quietly, piece by piece, until you don't recognize your own life anymore. But Laura didn't let that be her ending. She didn't just survive the lie. She exposed it. She faced the silence and made it speak. If you've ever felt gaslighted, unseen, or broken by someone you trusted, you are not alone, and you are not weak for still caring. You are strong for seeing the truth through the fog. Leave a comment below if this story spoke to your experience. We read every word. Subscribe to Betrayal and Forgiveness for more real-life inspired stories of truth, healing, and emotional justice. Turn on notifications because the next betrayal may feel too familiar.